I was in the middle of feeding Henrietta, my favorite red-feathered girl, when I heard the gate slam shut. 3 people were standing in my backyard like they owned the place. 2 HOA board members and Barbara, the president. Barbara was holding a manila folder and wearing a pair of sunglasses so big they made her look like a cartoon villain. I didn't even get a hello. She walked right up to the edge of my chicken run and scoffed. "What is this?" she snapped. I blinked. "This is a chicken. That's a chicken. And that over there, believe it or not, is also a chicken." I was trying to keep it light, but her face didn't move. No smile, just disgust. "You're in violation of Section 4A Subcode 9. Unapproved livestock is strictly prohibited on residential plots. You'll need to remove all poultry within 72 hours or face daily fines of $200. I stared at her, then looked at the other 2 board members. One wouldn't meet my eyes, and the other seemed like he wanted to be anywhere else. "I'm sorry," I said calmly, "but these chickens are registered. I'm licensed under the USDA for small-scale backyard farming. Everything's legal. Zoning, waste disposal, biosecurity. I've done my homework." Barbara didn't care. She pulled a paper from the folder and handed it to me. "This is your official notice. You can appeal, but it won't change the outcome. This is a residential neighborhood, not a barnyard." The way she said barnyard, you'd think I was raising hyenas in a Manhattan penthouse. "I've lived here 7 years, I said. "No one's ever complained." "Well, now someone has," she snapped. "Multiple people, actually. Children scared of noise, people complaining about the smell." Henrietta squawked at that. "Right on cue." I looked at her and smirked. "She smells better than most HOA meetings," I muttered. Barbara wasn't amused. She turned and walked back to the gate, heels crunching against the gravel like an executioner's march. The other board members followed, heads down. Before leaving, she stopped and turned. 72 hours, or the fines begin. Then they were gone. I stood there for a long moment, still holding the paper. Henrietta pecked gently at my boot like she was checking to see if I was okay. I crouched beside her, trying to calm the storm building in my chest. This wasn't about chickens, it was about control. My chickens were clean, quiet, and contained. My license wasn't just legal, it was federal. USDA had approved my operation 2 years ago when I started raising heritage breeds for eggs and education. I'd even given co-op tours to the local elementary school. But Barbara didn't care about any of that. She cared about power. And someone like me, quiet, independent, legally bulletproof, threatened the tiny empire she ran on rules and intimidation. I went inside, printed out every page of my USDA license and the local zoning code, and stapled them together into a thick packet. I wanted to be ready, and then I made one more call to my cousin Mia. Mia isn't just family. She's the family weapon. Grew up on a farm, became a lawyer, and now she specializes in agricultural law and rural property disputes. When I told her what happened, she laughed so hard I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Oh, they picked the wrong chicken owner," she said. "Did you tell them you're federally licensed?" "I tried," I said. Barbara didn't. "Listen," she handed me a violation and left. There was a pause. "Okay," she said. "Forward me everything. I'll draft a letter tonight. If they push this, we'll push back. And hard." I emailed her the violation, my USDA documents, and zoning code excerpts. Then I took a deep breath and walked back out to the coop. The sun was setting behind the trees, casting a warm orange light across the backyard. The girls were already settling in for the night, feathers fluffed, content. They didn't know a war was coming. The next morning, I found 3 more notices taped to my mailbox. Citations for noise disturbance, improper fencing, and failure to comply with architectural standards. It was clear Barbara wasn't done. I walked up the driveway with the papers in one hand and my coffee in the other, trying to keep my cool. This wasn't normal enforcement, it was targeted harassment. I posted everything in the neighborhood, forum online. I didn't name names, just facts. Within hours, the thread exploded. Some people thanked me for speaking up, quietly. Others were clearly afraid to say anything publicly, messaging me privately with their own horror stories. Barbara had fined one neighbor for a faded welcome mat, another for wind chimes. One woman was fined for having a garden hose visible from the street. This wasn't community management, this was rule by fear, but this time she'd messed with the wrong person. That evening, Mia's letter arrived. It was glorious. 4 pages long, cited federal and state laws, included legal threats Barbara clearly wasn't expecting, and it ended with a clear warning. Any attempt to remove or interfere with USDA-protected livestock will result in immediate legal action and pursuit of damages. I printed it, folded it neatly, and walked it over to the HOA drop box like I was delivering a bomb. Then I waited. 2 days later, Barbara showed up again, this time alone. I was watering the tomatoes when I heard the same gate slam. She marched across the yard and stopped short when she saw the chickens still clucking contentedly in their run. "I thought I made myself clear," she said. "I stood tall." "You did. So did my lawyer." "Did you read the letter?" Barbara's lips tightened. "You think having a cousin who's a lawyer scares me?" "No," I said. "But the USDA might? And the county zoning board? And the agricultural commissioner?" She took a step forward, finger pointing. "You don't get special treatment just because you have chickens." "I don't want special treatment. I want the law followed. That's what your job is, right?" She opened her mouth like she was going to say something else, but didn't. She turned around and stormed off, back through the gate. I exhaled. It was the first breath that didn't feel like fire in days. But I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. Barbara wasn't the type to give up after one pushback. But now she knew. I wasn't some guy breaking the rules with a backyard fantasy. I was a federally licensed agricultural operator, and I had a cousin with a courtroom record longer than the HOA's. Bylaw binder. They tried to scare me with a clipboard. I had federal paperwork, and a cousin with a law degree. The letter was respectful. It was professionally written, calmly worded, and signed by an actual attorney. Mia had even refrained from using the phrase gross overreach of power, though I could tell she wanted to. I dropped it into the HOA mailbox the morning after Barbara's little backyard performance. By noon, I'd received no response, not even a courtesy email. By the end of the day, 3 more citations showed up in my mailbox, one for non-compliant fencing, one for unauthorized signage, a small hand-painted coop sign that read hen headquarters, and a third one I couldn't even read because it was smudged from the rain. They'd used the cheapest printer ink imaginable. Classic HOA, I sent scanned copies to Mia. She called me 5 minutes later. So now they're retaliating. That's what it looks like. "This isn't just petty anymore," she said. "This is harassment. And the moment they make one, wrong step, we pounce." That night, I walked out to the chicken run and sat on the edge of the sandbox I'd set up so my girls could dust bathe. Henrietta waddled over and nestled beside my boot like she could feel the stress radiating off me. "They really hate you, huh?" I said. She cooed and tucked her beak into her feathers. That was the strange thing. It wasn't the chickens. It was what the chickens represented. Freedom, self-reliance, something that didn't fit inside Barbara's perfect vision of white fences and silence. Barbara ran the HOA like a private regime. She didn't like nonconformity. She liked control. And the chickens? They were loud, proud, and very, very visible. I didn't know it yet, but they were about to become a symbol. The next day, I got a phone call from a neighbor. "I'm so sorry," she said. I didn't know what she was planning. Who? Barbara. She sent out a neighborhood-wide email this morning. She said you're illegally operating a farm and putting the community at risk. My jaw clenched. That's defamation. She also said you were hoarding animals, and that animal control might get involved. I didn't answer right away. I was standing in the kitchen with the phone in one hand and my coffee going cold in the other. Outside the window, the coop sat peacefully in the morning sun. My horde of 7 chickens was pecking the grass, unaware that their existence had become the neighborhood's newest scandal. I thanked the neighbor for the heads up and hung up. 2 minutes later, I was on the phone with Mia again. We didn't play defense this time. Mia drafted a formal cease and desist. She included language about defamation, USDA preemption, and potential litigation. We also attached screenshots of the HOA group emails, forwarded by neighbors who didn't like Barbara but were scared of I crossing her. Barbara's words were clear. Mr. Carson is operating what we believe to be an unlicensed agricultural facility. It poses a threat to neighborhood cleanliness, order, and community values. Community values. I printed that phrase and pinned it to the corkboard above my desk, just so I wouldn't forget. By day 4, the battle had spilled into the sidewalks. Some neighbors started crossing the street to avoid me. Others waved more enthusiastically than usual. Silent shows of solidarity. One guy left a bag of feed on my porch with a note, "For the resistance." Barbara didn't like that. That night, she sent out a full HOA bulletin with bold red letters. Immediate notice. Daily fines to be enforced for non-compliance. Co-op must be removed. Within 48 hours or lien proceedings will begin. I sat on my porch, reading it aloud to Henrietta, who looked equally unimpressed. Lien proceedings, I repeated, on a federally registered agricultural site. Henrietta sneezed. The next morning, animal control showed up. 2 officers, both polite, both clearly embarrassed. They looked at the coop, checked the feed bins, and even admired the handmade nesting boxes. "You're in full compliance," one of them said. "Actually, this is one of the cleanest backyard setups I've seen." "Appreciate that," I said. "Mind if I record this?" Not at all. The video would come in handy later. When they left, I emailed the footage to Mia. 2 hours later, Barbara showed up again. This time, she didn't walk into my yard. She stood on the sidewalk like she thought it gave her moral high ground and shouted across the lawn, "You're making a mockery of this community." I walked out with a cup of iced tea in hand, calm as ever. "No," I said. "I'm making breakfast." "Don't get smug. This isn't over." "Correct," I said, sipping slowly. "This is just the beginning." She stormed off. Behind me, Henrietta let out a loud cackle. I swear that bird had comic timing. That night, I wrote a post for the neighborhood Facebook group. I didn't insult Barbara. I didn't name names. I simply laid out the facts, that I held a USDA license, that my setup was fully legal under state and federal law, that I had never been cited by animal control, that I had never violated zoning laws, that I had offered to meet with the board to explain everything and been ignored. And finally, I'm not just defending my chickens. I'm defending the right to live without being bullied under the illusion of community. By morning, the post had over 100 likes and 37 comments. Neighbors started speaking out, quiet ones, people who'd never attended HOA meetings. A woman posted her story about being fined for putting a little free library in her yard. A retired teacher talked about being yelled at for planting native wildflowers. Something was changing, Barbara noticed. The next day, I received a formal email from the HOA board's legal rep. Only it wasn't an attorney. It was Barbara's brother-in-law, who lived 2 towns over and practiced estate law. I sent it to Mia. She laughed so hard I thought she was going to fall off her chair. Barbara thought she understood the rules, she said. Then she paused. But I wrote them. Barbara thought. She understood the rules. Mia wrote them. It was a Saturday morning when I realized Barbara had officially lost her mind. I stepped outside with my coffee and walked toward the coop like I did every day, except something was off. The gate, a simple wooden latch I'd had for 2 years, was padlocked. Not my lock. This one was silver, brand new, and tight as a drum. My chickens were inside, fluttering nervously. I could hear Henrietta making agitated chirps from the nesting box. I blinked twice. Thought maybe a neighbor had done something weird. Then I saw the laminated HOA citation zip-tied to the fence. Bright red letters, unauthorized access. Pending removal. My blood boiled instantly. I dropped my coffee. They'd locked my chickens inside their own home. I tried calling the HOA hotline. Straight to voicemail. Then I texted Barbara. No answer. I didn't even try being polite anymore. I called Mia. Can they do that? I asked. Mia didn't even pause. Absolutely not. That's property interference. It's illegal. And frankly, it's an animal welfare violation. Give me 10 minutes. She hung up. I walked back inside, grabbed my drill, and took the damn padlock off. Not ripped, not destroyed, just unscrewed the hinge, opened the gate, and checked on the girls. They were fine. A little freaked out, but unharmed. I refilled their feed, gave Henrietta a calming stroke, and sat in the run with my jaw clenched. That was the moment it all became clear. This wasn't just about citations or policies or bylaws. This was personal. This was war. By noon, animal control showed up again. Different officer this time. This one looked annoyed from the minute he stepped out of his truck. Got a report about livestock being mistreated. Coop locked. Chickens in distress, I pointed, to the open gate. Locked by the HOA. I've got video proof. I removed the padlock this morning. He looked around the run, checked the water line, the food supply, the ventilation. He didn't say a word for a full 2 minutes. Then he finally muttered, "This is a better setup than some rescue shelters I've seen." I handed him the HOA notice. He took one glance, then said, "This isn't within their jurisdiction." I recorded the entire conversation. Later that afternoon, Barbara sent an email to the neighborhood. HOA acts to protect neighborhood standards. She claimed she'd intervened to prevent further livestock nuisance and accused me of hostile behavior toward enforcement officers. The lies were in bold. The self-importance was unbearable. Forwarded the email to Mia. She didn't just respond. She took action. That evening, Mia filed a formal cease and desist with the HOA board on my behalf. It included accusations of harassment, property interference, defamation, and threats of civil rights violations related to lawful agricultural activity. She also CC'd the USDA. That part got Barbara's attention, because 2 days later I received a call from an agent with the USDA compliance office. His tone was professional but friendly. "We've received some questions regarding your license. I'm just doing the standard verification. Can you confirm your property ID and current activity?" I gave him everything. License number, scale, of operation, breed type, even where I source my feed. He paused for a second. "This all checks out. You're not just compliant, you're basically textbook." I laughed. "You want me to testify at HOA meetings?" He chuckled. "Honestly? Sounds like they need a seminar." But the real explosion came the next morning. I was sipping coffee when a silver van rolled down the street and parked across from my house. 2 people got out carrying cameras and notepads. The logo on the side of the van said, Channel 6 News. On your side, I stepped outside, and before I could say a word, the reporter smiled. "Are you the chicken guy?" I nodded cautiously. She laughed. "We've had 5 people call in about you. Your cousin said you might be willing to talk?" "Damn, Mia." I invited them in, showed them the coop, the paperwork, the padlock, the citations. I didn't rant. I didn't scream. I just told the truth, and the camera captured all of it. The segment aired that night. Local HOA tries to ban chickens, but this owner fought back with federal law. They showed my USDA license, the video of animal control praising the coop, and the cease and desist letter's highlights. Then they cut to Barbara, who refused to comment but was filmed storming into the HOA office with sunglasses and a folder. Again. Neighbors started calling. One told me Barbara had threatened to fine her for having a Halloween flag up in February. Another said he was fined for letting his kid's bike lean against the porch. The chickens had become a symbol. Later that night, someone slipped a note under my door. "Thank you for standing up. We're tired of the fear. Let us know how we can help." It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. I stood on my back porch with Henrietta nestled in my arms. The stars were out. The coop glowed faintly with the solar light I'd installed months ago. Peaceful, quiet, defiant. Barbara's empire was cracking. This was no longer about poultry. This was about dignity, about bullying disguised as policy, about control wearing a clipboard and calling itself order. And now the whole city knew. Final line. Now the whole city knew. This wasn't about chickens. It was about power. Barbara had made one critical mistake. She thought she was the queen of the cul-de-sac, ruling over hedges and mailboxes. But when she crossed into the realm of federal agriculture law, she stepped outside her little HOA playpen and straight into open court. It started with the lawsuit. Mia filed it like a master of war laying out a battle plan. Not dramatic, not explosive, just cold, thorough, and devastating. The claims: harassment, unlawful property interference, defamation, retaliatory conduct, civil rights violations tied to lawful agricultural use. But that was just the first volley, because Mia didn't just file it. She copied the USDA. She copied the state agricultural commissioner, and, this was the kicker, she included detailed footage of animal control officers stating on camera that my coop was one of the best setups they'd ever seen. Barbara had painted herself into a legal corner, and we were about to pull the floor out from under her. 3 days after the lawsuit was filed, I received another letter, but this one was different. It wasn't printed on HOA letterhead. It was from the State Department of Agriculture, notifying me that the USDA had opened a compliance review on the HOA's conduct, triggered by my lawyer's documentation and interference with licensed agricultural activity. In other words, the HOA itself was now under investigation. Barbara's plan had backfired so hard it triggered federal oversight. I forwarded the letter to Mia. She replied with 2 words: checkmate. By the end of the week, things began unraveling, for Barbara in real time. First, the HOA board received formal subpoenas requesting their email communications regarding livestock nuisances and property violations from the past 18 months. Then came the neighbor statements. At first, it was just 1 or 2 people, but by the time Mia posted a formal call for testimony, we had 11 neighbors come forward, many with their own citations, threats, and stories of quiet bullying from the HOA president. The court hadn't even met yet, and Barbara was already bleeding credibility. But I didn't gloat. I stayed quiet, focused. I kept my coop clean, my hens healthy, and my presence peaceful. Every move was documented. Every encounter recorded. Barbara wanted me to snap, to yell, to give her a viral moment she could weaponize in a board meeting, but I wasn't giving her anything. The tension finally cracked one Monday morning. I was at the grocery store when my phone started blowing up. 3 missed calls, 7 texts. One from a neighbor simply saying, "Turn on channel 6. I pulled it up on my phone. There she was, Barbara, Liv. Outside the HOA office, refusing to answer questions from the same reporter who had interviewed me. They were investigating accusations of misconduct and misuse of authority. When she tried to storm off camera, a voice from behind the mic asked, "Did you falsify citations against a USDA-licensed homeowner?" Barbara froze mid-step, turned and muttered, "No comment," but her face said it all. The next HOA board meeting was standing room only. I didn't speak. I just sat in the back as residents lined up at the mic, one after another, sharing their stories. I was fined $250 for a hummingbird feeder. She threatened me over my holiday lights. I got a letter saying my toddler's playset was a visual disruption. By the third speaker, Barbara's face had gone from smug to stone. By the 7th, she walked out of the room. The vice president, who had been quiet the whole time, stood up, adjusted his tie, and said calmly, "We will be holding a vote of no confidence in the president next week." The crowd erupted into applause. 2 days later, I got approval from the interim board to reinstall my co-op structure. Even though it had never technically been removed, I took the opportunity to expand. Mia encouraged me to make it a B symbol. So I did. Fresh paint, upgraded fencing, solar-powered fans, a rainwater harvesting system. I even built a little sign that said USDA certified. Chickens' welcome neighbors came by to watch. One family brought lemonade. A retired engineer helped me reinforce the posts. The coop became a gathering point, not just for birds, but for people who were tired of being intimidated. And Barbara? She disappeared from public view. The week after the vote, she officially resigned as HOA president. Word spread that she'd retained legal counsel, but not Mia-level legal. Just someone to limit exposure. There were rumors she'd tried to claim she had misinterpreted bylaws, but the documents told the truth. Her war on my chickens had backfired so completely she had burned her own castle down. 3 weeks. After her resignation, I received another envelope, this one from the HOA's new interim president. Inside was a single-page letter. It read, "We acknowledge the legality of your agricultural operation and sincerely apologize for any distress or inconvenience caused. The HOA will make no further attempt to regulate or interfere with your USDA-licensed activity. Thank you for your patience and contributions to the community." It was signed, sealed, and notarized. I posted it on the bulletin board beside the cup. Henrietta pecked at it like she approved. That weekend, I hosted a small coop celebration. Neighbors came, kids fed the hens. Someone brought cupcakes shaped like little eggs. People smiled. They weren't scared anymore. It was the first time our street had felt like an actual neighborhood instead of a gated kingdom. Barbara's legacy had been replaced by something better: coexistence, courage, and 7 extremely photogenic chickens. Final line. By the time Barbara realized she'd lost, my hens were already laying again. Barbara's resignation wasn't quiet. There was no dignity in it, no statement of reflection, no graceful exit. Just a curt email sent at 2:13 a.m. on a Thursday morning. "I hereby resign from my position as HOA president effective immediately." Some say she cried. Others say she yelled at the board. A few claim she threatened to sue the HOA for abandoning her. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. Either way, by the time the sun came up, her nameplate had been scraped off the HOA office door. I watched it happen from my porch, with a cup of coffee in hand and Henrietta perched beside me like a feathered general enjoying her victory parade. The new HOA board took over within a week. They didn't waste time with performative handshakes or empty promises. They called a public meeting, passed a transparency measure, and invited residents to submit all grievances previously ignored. The room was packed. For the first time, people who had felt invisible under Barbara's rule were standing at the mic and telling their stories, some angry, some tearful, all relieved. When my name was called, I stood up, not to gloat, but to thank those who had stepped forward when it mattered. "I never wanted to be the guy with the chickens," I said. "But when someone tries to crush you under a rule they made up, sometimes you've got to remind them the law wasn't written by their clipboard." The room laughed. Even the board members smiled. 2 days later, the USDA issued a formal letter, not just to me, but to the entire HOA board. It affirmed that my operation was in full compliance with federal and state agricultural guidelines. The language was clear. The USDA recognizes the property of Mr. Carson as a legally registered and properly maintained small-scale agricultural site. No local ordinance may interfere with the operation unless federal or state law is violated. Barbara's Campaign had triggered a national agency into action, and that agency had spoken loudly, publicly, in writing. A week later, something unexpected happened. The new HOA board approached me, not with a citation, not with a threat, but with a question. "Would you consider participating in this year's spring block party?" they asked. "Maybe a community chicken theme?" I nearly choked on my coffee, but then I realized they were serious. That's how Cluckfest was born. We turned my backyard into a mini fairground. There were hand-painted signs: "Meet the ladies," "Henrietta's Corner," "Egg," "Toss," "Rubber eggs only." Kids got to feed the chickens, paint little coop cutouts, and learn about sustainable backyard farming. A local band played bluegrass near the fence line. Neighbors brought potluck dishes, some even themed. Yes, someone brought deviled eggs. No, the irony was not lost on anyone. Mia showed up in a straw hat and a t-shirt that said USDA approved. We took photos, we laughed, and most importantly, we healed. For the first time in years, the neighborhood felt like a community again. People smiled more. They waved at each other again. Sidewalks felt safer, warmer, human. Even those who had once whispered about livestock on the lawn were now asking what kind of feed I used and how hard it was to build a coop. One couple down the block applied for their own USDA small-scale exemption. Another family bought 3 chicks from a local hatchery and named them Hope, Justice, and Barb. The last one being a joke, of course. As for Barbara, she moved out 2 months after her resignation. No one knows where she went, but the listing for her home said "motivated seller" and dropped in price 3 times in 3 weeks. Some say she tried to run for a different HOA board in another county. Others say she's still telling people she was wrongfully targeted. I don't care. Let her spin whatever story helps her sleep, because the truth is written in every laugh at Cluckfest, every egg carton I hand to a neighbor, every child who pets Henrietta with wonder in their eyes instead of fear. Mia kept the lawsuit open just long enough to ensure everything we wanted was codified into the HOA's governing documents. We didn't ask for money, we asked for reform. The bylaws were rewritten to include specific exemptions for USDA-licensed activity. Language was added to limit board authority regarding agricultural complaints. And a formal clause was included requiring third-party legal review before any enforcement action is taken. Barbara's empire had been turned into a blueprint for never letting it happen again. One afternoon, weeks after everything settled down, I sat on the porch watching the sunset. Henrietta was scratching beside me, and a light breeze rustled the coop's new wind chimes, gifted to me by the very neighbor who once called chickens noisy pests. Funny how things change. I thought about everything we'd been through: the padlock, the citations, the camera crews, the late nights on the phone with Mia, the anonymous notes from neighbors, once afraid to speak. And then I thought about the first time I heard Barbara say those words. These chickens don't belong here. How wrong she was. They didn't just belong. They'd become the heartbeat of a community that had forgotten how to stand up, until a few hens reminded them. Final line: they tried to bury my chickens. But they didn't realize they were standing on legal eggshells. Call to action, CTA. Ever had an HOA try to control something they had no right to? Share your revenge story below, and hit like if you believe chickens deserve better neighbors than Barbara.